Hi guys, welcome to King Technologies. Today we are going to learn CSS. CSS is second step in web development, and this video is for those who know HTML. If you don't know HTML, consider watching my HTML video first and then watch this one. You just need to know HTML before starting with CSS. In this video, I'm going from basics to intermediate level of CSS. You don't need to have any experience at all with CSS to follow along. When it comes to CSS, it's much freer than HTML, as there are a lot of ways to achieve same thing. I'm not going to cover any advanced topic like flexbox, transition or animation in this video. Stay tuned for that. Those videos will be coming soon. The first thing, what is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. It is used for design and layout, so it's quite artistic. It allows to create great looking web pages. And trust me, there are a lot of developers, professionals, they struggle with CSS. You need to be creative to get something done in CSS. We just write rules, nothing else in CSS, like color, padding, margins, and borders, and much more. Now let's go through the anatomy of CSS. So CSS ruleset have three main things: a selector, a property, and the respective value of the property. Like the selector can be a tag. Actually, we have like 6 type of selectors: tag, ID, class selector, attribute selector, or pseudo class selector, or maybe universal selector. Then inside curly braces, we define CSS rules as key value pairs. So property can be a color like margin, padding, border, and they have respective values. Like that is margin, then the value gonna be in the pixel or percentage. If it is a color, then it's gonna be a red, green, blue, or it can be HTML color or like a hex value. We are going to cover everything in a bit. How you can define CSS. So there's three ways or three methods to define CSS. Either you go with inline, internal, or external. And in your development career, you will see that internal and inline CSS is just like ready to go CSS, but the external CSS is you mostly use for your projects. Let's create a folder. I can use my project initiator. CREATE, create, let's call it CSS, and second step with O for organization. You can follow along with just like either use a project initiator like me, or just create a folder and open that folder in VSCode. After that, create an index.html file, and I am using an HTML boilerplate, so you will have this couple of tags already like HTML body tags. Right click on your file and click on open with live server. Let's put them side by side, and let's use a p tag for now to demonstrate you all the three ways to define CSS. Let's use Gautam Ipsum, and after that let's first use style attribute style, and you can define here all the properties like let's define color and give it a width, so it will change because of live server. It get like hot reload. And let's move it. Here you can also define multiple styles like margin. Let's give it like 10 pixels, and you will separate them using semicolon. Let's give it 100 so you will see the difference. After that, just let's remove this one and use a style tag, and here I'm using tag selector and putting color as green. This is internal CSS. After that, let's just comment it out here for you, and let's put here internal CSS. Let's use external CSS. For that, first you need to create a file that's called like style.css or style.css. After that, you need to link it, because only that HTML document will know that which style you want to use. So you can use link and colon CSS, and VSCode will autocomplete it for you, and you will have this. Let's put the okay, that's fine. Now let's use a p tag here and color blue, so we'll have this blue, and in this way you define external CSS. Let's just comment it out here, external CSS. And if your file is in folder like let's rename this file to CSS slash, so it will be now inside the folder. So what you can do is here you can put a dot slash CSS slash, and HTML will identify this file for you. Let's change the color to test. So you can hover on it and change the color, like let's give it a red using RGB. So it's changing. That means a link perfectly alright. Now let's go with the colors. So I'm using body tag here, and let's give it a background color of hashtag F4, F4, F3, F3, F3. Yeah, let's increase a bit. Yeah, so it's good. Now you can define a color property here. Let's give it a 444. Good. Color will change the foreground color, and background color change will change the background. So if you make it like a dark, you will see the difference, and make it white because please overriding it. Okay. Now for color property you have let's just comment it out and put color. For color you have either color names like red, green, blue, or hexadecimal values like a pound sign with like a 3 values like 444, or you can use a 6 values like 444444. So it's work like RGB or RGB in this way. You can define up 0 up to 255, so that's gonna be FF, or you can use RGB functions, so like this RGB, and here you can give the value in red, green, blue. So let's go 44, 33, 22 like this, or you can use RGB A for giving opacity also. So it's like for 29 something and like 0.5 or something. Okay, let's change value, this value with this, so we'll see the difference. See, it's like a opaque bit, and you can increase the opacity from here as well. Okay, so let's give full. Okay, if you make it full, the opacity will go, and you can just use RGB function. So this is all about colors. Wherever you define a color, you can use any one of them. Okay, now let's go with the text styling. So let's define p tag here. After that, let's use font family. So you'll have a couple of these options like monospace or Helvetica, Gigoria, Verdana. So let's give it Verdana. We'll see the difference here. If you're wondering why we define Verdana, Geneva, Tahoma, sans serif, like 4 fonts, so if browser don't find this one, then this font will be applied. Next property we have is font size, and you can define them either like larger, medium, small, or in pixels. 16 pixels is default value, and let's give it like 26 or 36, so we'll see the difference. Let's give it back to 16. That's fine. After that you have font weight up to 900 values in hundreds, and in words bold, bolder, lighter, normal. So let's give it a normal. I'm using default values because I don't want to change it. After that you have line height, and these values come in EM, like 1 EM, and if you want to increase you can use like 1.6 EM or 1.5 EM. And you also have word spacing, so if you give word spacing like 1.5 EM again, you will see space in between words. Let's just comment it out for now. After that let's create another div here, and let's just cut it out and put a div and give it a class mean one will do the job. For creating a class, you need to use a dot operator and the name of the class, that is main1, and after that you can define like a background color. Let's give it a gray, and color, let's use FFF like this. Let's comment it out all the properties, this one also. So let's see, and let's use a section tag also, so we can define a couple of sections here. Here this is main1, and for section I'm using direct tag here and giving a width of 60%. You can also use like 900 pixels, 960 pixels, but that's not responsive. Responsive means that if you change the width will not change. Now the width is changing, so if you give like let's give it 960 pixels. See, the width is not changing, but if you give the values in percentage like 60%, then it is quite responsive. See, and let's give it a margin auto for now. I'll explain margin in a bit. So you will see now it's centered and responsive. Let's give it a padding as well. So again, padding and 10 pixels and 20 pixels. Yeah, that will do the job. Now let's go through margin, padding and border. So it's called the box model. Let's understand this one. So if you right click anywhere in the web page and inspect, this is the box model. So let's make it downside a bit. Okay, I'm using this select an element and selecting this. You are seeing that the padding is 10-10 for top bottom and 20-20 for left and right. There's no border or no margin. Now let's define margin and border as well. So if you give margin, let's give it 20 pixels for now, and give it a border of 2 pixels solid, with a blue. Okay, so now you have the margin 20 pixels for all side and border 2 pixels for all side. Let's go first with the padding. If you define just one value in padding, it will be applied for all the sides. As you can see here, like padding is applied on all the sides, top, bottom, left, right. If you define then two values like 10 pixels and 20 pixels, you will see it the first value is applied on top, bottom, and second value is on left and right. If you put just one value in padding or margin, they work the same. So if you just put one value here, then it is applied on all the sides like top, bottom, left, right. If you give them two values like 10 pixels and 20 pixels, then it is applied, the 10 pixel is gonna apply it on top and bottom, and 20 pixel gonna apply it on left and right. So it's like X and Y. If you give three values like 10, 20 and 30 pixels, so this gonna be your top, and this gonna be your bottom, and this gonna be your left and right. If you give them four values like 10, 20, 30, 40 pixels, then it is applied top, right, bottom, left. It's like clockwise, top, right, bottom, left. And same for the margin. If you give them margin, it exactly works the same. If you give one value, it is applied all the sides. If you give them two values, it's X and Y. If you give three values, then first value is for top, second is for left and right, and third is for bottom. And if you give them four values, then it's gonna be top, right, bottom, left, clockwise. You can also define them differently as margin, top, bottom, left, right. Same for the padding. Now let's go with the border, because border have three extra properties. So you have border, bottom, and after that you can also have different style. So let's give it a like a style, and you have all these styles. Let's give it dotted, so you'll see the difference. So let's get dotted. Let's give it a 12 pixels, so you'll see the difference. Let's give border white. Let's give it a red color. So border white, red, border right color, red. Okay, in this way. Remove the margin, give it a bit of padding. Let's give it a padding of 0 pixels and 20 pixels. So it's gonna apply only left and right. And after that, let's give it. Let's remove this dotted. I don't like that. Yeah, it's kind of cool, but it's very big, so let's make it 4 pixels. Yeah, it's looking good. So I think now you understand box model. Let's talk about universal selector as well. Universal selector is star. Okay, let me just give it a comment. F as universal selector, and it means you're selecting every element. For explaining the use of this, let's put a h1 here and give it like hello world. Now see, if you inspect this, see this one, it has by default some margin. So if you want to reset them all, like every element you want to be base value zeros, so you can do a margin 0 here and a padding 0 here. It also called reset. Okay, now let's go to the next other font properties. So okay, let's change this box and give it a margin of 20 pixels, or yeah, 20 pixels, and give it a padding for all the side as well, 20 pixels. And let's apply it a bit of h1 too, so mean one h1, and let's give it a margin bottom of 20 pixels. Okay, now it's looking good. Now let's make it use some other properties like font family done, font weight, font style, give it a text decoration. So you can have this all the text decoration like underline, so you'll have this underline. One more thing you have is called letter spacing. Let's give it 5 pixels will do the job, 6 pixels will do the job. So see, it's okay, it's not looking pretty, so make it 4 or 3. Okay, 4, it's looking good. Let's close the inspector. Okay, now let's create a good looking box. Dive dot mean to. This is called emit. Give a short expression and you will have this all like complete statement. I'm going to make a video on emits as well, so stay tuned for that. Let's use h1 again and give it another hello world. Let's use a p tag again and give it a lorem ipsum. Great. Now it's called mean2, so let's use dot mean2, and let's use the id as well. So if you give it as id, the difference between id and class is id you just use for one element, it's like unique, but a class you can use multiple times. If you use any framework, they only use classes because id is like make things complicated. For using id you need to use hash or pound sign. And okay, let's give it a padding of 20 pixels again and margin 20 pixels again. Okay, now let's give it a border of 1 pixel, give it 444 and solid. And another property I want to give is border radius. Let's give it 10 pixels and see. Okay, it's very low, so you'll see this rounded border. That's because of border radius. Let's give it 30 pixels. Okay, it's looking good. Let's increase the padding a bit to 25. Yeah, and let's give it hash mean 2 h1 and margin bottom 10 pixels. Great, it's looking good. Now let's create a list inside it. So a list, let's use an unordered list, ul and li, and give it like red, green, blue, and gem. Now let's go with style.css and change a bit styling. So what we can do is it has mean to and ul. Let's give it a list style. You can give it a list style image or position type or style. For now, let's make it a circle, or if you want, you can make it none as well. Let's give it a margin top of 20 pixels, so it's look good. Mean to ULLI, and let's give it a border bottom of 1 pixel, hash 444 solid. Okay, and for H1, let's make it text align center. Okay, it's looking good. Let's change the color to something more reddish. Okay, and if you want, you can the text align center as well for this one. Let's give a margin bottom for this one also 5 pixels. For list style, you have also list style, position, inside, outside. So if you make it outside, sure, if you make it none, it will not show you. So if you make it outside, you'll see it's outside, and if you make it inside, it is inside. So that's the difference. That's it for the styling. After that, let's make a form, because by default HTML form is very ugly. So let's create dive.main3 by using image, and give it a h1 of form. But let's create a form with a post action. We don't need, because we don't going to use it. Let's give it a dive of form group and label for, let's call it email input email. Okay, that will do the job. And let's just copy paste for password as well. Actually make it a contact us form. So let's give it a name type text. Okay, then email, yeah, and let's create the form group and give it msg for message, and let's use text area for it. So we don't need column and rows for now, and we don't need id even, names too, and just put a message here as a placeholder for text area. Okay, great. It's not looking good, as you can see, so let's make it good looking. So for that, I'm using hash main. I use idea class. Okay, it's class, yes. So we need to use a dot here. Dot main 3 and a form. Okay, let's use these properties. I like this one. So let's give it a margin, padding, border radius. Okay, that's for the form. This is apply to here as well. Okay, now for the dot main 3, let's give it h1 text align center. Okay, and margin bottom to be like 10 pixel, give it 20. Good. Now dot main 3 form, and for form, that's input. Let's give it a submit button as well. Input submit value submit. Okay, good. Now for form, you can use input, and when I talked about selectors, there's also called attribute selector. What that means is you can select a selector based on attribute. So here I'm going type equals text. Give it width 100%, padding of 10 pixels. For label, so let's go with main 3 form label, and let's give it a display block. What this do is it will make this element display as a block. By default, label is an inline element. And let's change the font size a bit to 20 pixels. Okay, let's make it 24. For the form group, let's give it a margin bottom of 20 pixels. Good. Now see, this is looking a bit ugly. With padding 10 pixels, it is making it outside of 100%. We can make it right by using box sizing property and make it border box. So what happened, by default it's a content box, so everything works outside the content, but when you make it border box, it works inside the border. Now see, this is not applied on this one, so what you can do is you can use a comma here and apply this same rule set for another element as well by using main3 form and input type equals email. Great. And let's same rule for text area as well. We can just use text area directly. Now let's design the button. So give it a button class and let's give it a background color of white, border 0, outline 0, and give it a color black. Let's give it a class of button. Okay, we need to give it a padding. Let's give it a 10 pixels. Now what we can do is we can use pseudo classes as well. So button hover, and let's change background color to black and foreground color to white. So now it's looking good, and also give it a cursor of pointer. Great. Now let's go through the anchor tag. We have some good things in anchor tag, so let's use an anchor tag. And for href, just use hashtag and give it a temporary, or I use mark1. Okay, so here your link. Let's put this link inside the div. Okay, let's start. Okay, I'm going to use a universal, so that needs to be here. It's a global. Let's give it a color of black and text decoration to none. Okay, it's looking good. But for anchor tag, you also have a couple of things like a hover. Let's give it a color of red and give it a text decoration underline. A active, and let's give it a color of yellow green. You also have a visited, so a and visited. I think you guess it, which gonna apply when. Okay, let's try it out. So we can give a color of aqua. Okay, so now if you hover on it, the color will change to red and it get an underline. If you click on it, it will be yellow green, and now it's visited because you visited on that. If you want to change it with something else, you can by using just hover on it and change the color to something else. Let's give it green. Now let's talk about align and float properties. Let's give the comment of align and float properties. These are not much using nowadays because we have like flexbox in grid to make layout, but let's go through it. So for that, let's create another section, and here let's create 2 divs, actually 3. A div, 3 divs with let's give like class block 1. Let's give it a block 2 block 3. Okay, now inside that let's give it an h1 and block 1 use a p tag with lorem option with lorem, and same for other blocks as well. So you will have this formatted. Now let's use and let's scroll a bit. Now you will see these are a block, and it's y1 2 3. Let's make it 1 2 and block 3. Let's use a div here for making this go up a bit. So let's use a div and style. I'm using Learn CSS, and let's give it a min height of 500 pixels. Let's give it a 500 pixels. Great. For styling, let's use dot block 1 and give it a width of 33.3%. Okay, and let's make it float left. Okay, great. And we need to apply same for other, so we can use a comma dot block 2 and dot block 3. Great. Now if you apply border here of let's give it a 1 pixels solid gray, see it come down because of this 1 pixel. It actually gonna be like 1 pixel here, 2 pixels here, then 1 pixel here, 1 pixel here, 1 pixel here. So it's 6 pixels. That's why it come down. So what we can do is we can use box sizing again and border box. Great. Now what we can do is we can give it a padding of 10 pixels. Good. Next thing we need to do is clear this fix. So for that we generally use a div dot, let's call it clear fix, and dot clear fix clear property and values both will do the job. Let's create a 60/40 layout. For that use a to div of let's create a site, and let's use the same, and one more, that is div dot sidebar, and here let's just give the tag with lorem option. Yeah, that's it. So aside and sidebar dot aside, and let's give it a width of 60% and float left. After that dot sidebar, we need to refresh sidebar width, let's give it a 40%, float right. Okay, and let's give it a margin top of 20 pixels. Same for this one. Okay, and let's make it 30, and yeah, let's give it a border of 1 px. Great. Padding of 20 pixels will do the job. Great. Now it's looking good and a good layout. After that, let's talk about positions. CSS positions. We have basically 4 main positions that are relative, absolute, fixed, static. For that, first you need to create or clear the fix. So for that we can use this one. After that, let's create some static box. So div.sbox. Inside this box, let's give it a h1 of heading 1, and let's get h2 heading 2 and alarm of some paragraph. This was showing you the positions. So let's give it a style. So dot s minus box, give it a width of 600 pixels, height of let's give it 300 pixels, and give it a border also 1px, solid gray. Gray. Great. Now let's give s box heading 1. Let's give it a position. Instead of relative, let's give it absolute, and let's give it top 50px. Now you can utilize top, left, bottom, right. What happened? It just get vanished, but it's not vanished actually. It's just on the top. So what absolute do? It make the element absolute as positions in respect of web page. So if you want that to be respect of the element, then what you can do is you can give this position relative. Now it's relative to this element. So what we can do is we can just give like a top 50px and let's left 100px. So now you can position it inside box anywhere you want. You can also use the left and right if you want. We can also give them bottom. Let's give it 20px and right 10px. Okay, so it's in bottom right. And same you can also do with the h2. Let's give it position absolute and top 10 pixels and give it like right 100 pixels. So let's give it top to 200 pixels. Okay, great. So it's top right and bottom right. Now we have static. By default every element is static, so no need to go with that. And now we have fixed. Fixed means that position never changes. So let's create an element here inside this section. Let's create a tag, class of button, and just put something here like temp. So here's our button. Now what we can do is let's give it another class, fixed position. Copy this one and with dot paste here and give it a position fixed, but we can do a top of let's give it a 400 pixels and right 0 pixels, actually left. So it stay here whenever, like if you scroll. So you can put like your contact details or like share buttons, social buttons kind of here with using position fixed. You can also create like navigation bars that stay here when you scroll, kind of that is the use of position fixed. So these are all CSS positions. Now let's talk about CSS background. So for that let's use sbox and background image. We need to use URL function and let's download an image. So let's give it text background. This is very stunning. Save images, and here we can just give it PG. Save. Okay, it's good. Now what we need to do is we need to go 2 steps back. Then this is our image. Now let's check it. So this is our background. For background we have couple of extra properties like background position, repeat, size, clip. Let's go with position and like give it center and center. Okay, actually one center is fine. Next thing we have is background repeat. Because it's a small element, so we don't need to do a repeat, but we can as no repeat or repeat x or repeat y if the image is very small. You can also do like center top here, two properties to change the alignment of the image. You have another property called background size, and here the cover is default. What cover do? It just fill out the picture, and if you make it contain, so what happen? It just contain the picture and shrink it, so you'll have this like repeat x is applying now. If you do not repeat, you will see only one image as a background, and you can do here like either cover or do a like contain and repeat x. Next thing I want to talk about is pseudo classes. Pseudo classes. Let's use a div, create like a class of what's called pseudo SEUDO pseudo, and let's use a couple of h2 here, heading 2. Yeah, this is our div with pseudo class, with pseudo as our class. So what you need to do is let's use a pseudo class, that is dot paste, and after that h2 let's go to first child and give it a color red. So see, the color is applied on the first child only. Other you have is last child as well, so let's put a comma here, and let's use just h2 and last child. So what happened, it is applied the last h2, not just this one, every last h2. You also have nth child, so dot pseudo h2, let's give it n child, and you can put any number, like let's give it a 3 or 2, let's give it a 3, and here let's change the background color to dark blue. You can also here put like a odd or even if you have dynamic data. So this is like a couple of most basic and most useful pseudo classes. Okay guys, that's it for this video. In the next video we are going to cover some advanced topics. Thanks for watching. Like, share and subscribe. Happy learning.